Good morning, Metropolitan. Good morning. Giving honor to God. Pastor Lamar, my periodic breakfast buddy. We sit down and we talk about what's going on in the world. And he drops some knowledge on me. And he thinks that I'm telling him stuff, but what really happens is there's a lesson in every story. And I'm telling him about what I've done, and he looks at me over his bacon and eggs, and he drops knowledge on me, and I go, And I walk away feeling fulfilled and connected. Amen. So thank you for your friendship and your leadership. Amen. To the Metropolitan ministerial staff and the lay committee, which finally succeeded in getting me up here. Amen. Truth be told, they just asked one time. So my beloved mighty men, if you have never heard them do their version of Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah, you have missed it. One day you will, I'm sure. Brings me to tears, even though usually I'm trying to sing it with them every time it happens. But I'm so grateful to have been a part of them and still a part of them and to be a part of them. The Metropolitan family, my own family, my beloved mother and father, Jesse and Daisy Green, my sister Karen and Jackie, brother-in-law Ben, and someone I affectionately call the little red-haired girl who's sitting out there, Dr. Gina Basemore, who many of you know, but you don't know how much of a spiritual impact she has on me, constantly telling me about how I need to do better here at Metropolitan. And I thank you so much for that, and one of these little days I'm going to marry that girl. And don't worry, we'll let you know. Pastor Lamar leaned over and asked me if he could get anything for me, and I told him I was nervous. And there's a reason for that, and there's a very good reason for that. A couple years ago, I was the commencement speaker at the University of Maryland, University College. And I got up there and I looked great. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you that they outfitted me well. Robe and stole and cap and tassel. And I got up and spoke for about 20, 25 minutes and felt great and just felt proud of myself. And when I got done and got home and had some time to take a minute to look at the video of it, I realized that the tassel was stuck in my beard the whole time. So I really looked like an idiot. So I learned as a result of that, no matter how good you feel, how good you think you look, be nervous. But Metropolitan, you look good this morning. Let's give yourself a hand. And this choir. Brother Marty, where you at? I know he's in here somewhere. There you are. Thank you so much. And to my Hampton Pirates, I know you didn't do very well against those Kentucky Wildcats. But as a brother who comes from back in the day when Rick Mahorn, whom all of you know, played basketball there, I know that we can and we will, once again, rise from the ashes. But today I wanted to talk with you a little while, and I won't take much of your time, about something that I believe, and this is just me, I believe it's the answer to put it this way, I believe it's the answer to many of the problems that we are afflicted with today. As Peggy so graciously outlined in the bio, I spent a lot of time traveling from place to place, and the general objective for me is to cover terrorism, national security, spies, military activity, conflict, a lot of very difficult subjects and a lot of unfortunate and sad subjects. And in my travels, I see a lot of just very troubling, difficult scenarios. And I believe there's but one element at the heart of all of that. But I also believe that this one element is at the heart of all of the problems of this world that we face today. There's but one common denominator. Several years ago, I was in Afghanistan, and it was at the height of the war. And I spent some time with some special forces up around Kabul, a couple days, and I met a medic there who, if you know anything about Afghanistan and places like that, they don't have hospitals, they don't have the urgent care that you can go to around the corner. They don't even have corners, okay? They just have flat, barren terrain, many mountains, and very inhospitable, austere territory. Very difficult to get around there. Bottom line is, when the military was there, one of the key elements that they provided for communities was medical attention. And I met a medic, his name was Bobby, and he told me he went to this one particular community out in the hinterlands near Kabul, and he met a family with a little girl, 9 years old. Her name was Dahlia. Dahlia was a big, bounding bundle of energy all the time. And she looked forward to when Bobby and his unit would come to town to do medical attention. And so Bobby had gotten to know her. He told me as a result of his getting to know her, she felt very comfortable with him and, you know, his team. Bobby told me he went away for a few weeks and he came back again to Dahlia's village to administer medical care, and Dahlia was different. She was sitting there in the makeshift office, and she was very upset. And so he and his co-workers and her parents asked her what was wrong. And she pointed to the back of the room, and there was a member of the Taliban in the room. And she pointed out that several days before, that man had been to her school and had beaten and threatened her and some of her colleagues. 9-year-old girl, mind you, telling them that education was not something that girls should participate in. He said they tried to hold the person, the individual that she pointed out, and, you know, detain him for a while, which they could only do for a while because there was no law enforcement skill, or rather law enforcement capability there. They just did not have that kind of mandate there. And they had to let him go. So he never finished telling me the story. By the time I ended my trip, I had a chance to reunite with Bobby. And Pastor Lamar, he told me something that broke my heart that day, and it continues to this day. He said the man that they had detained was freed, and he went and he found Dahlia, and he found her family, and he killed them all. A 9-year-old girl that just wanted to be educated, and burned the bodies. That element standing in the way of peace and progress is missing. That element that I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes, it's missing. That's one of those cases of it. Look at the Islamic State. They're on a quest to establish a global caliphate. You hear me, brothers? They decide that they want to call their version of Islam pure. They've hijacked this peaceful religion, calling it theirs. This organization, which by some estimates is worth close to $1 billion, most of which was stolen and the rest achieved by illegal and criminal means, have been enticing people to join them from all over the world, lying to them about being a utopia of sorts that dates back supposedly to the 7th century of Islamic history. And in the process of trying to build this empire, they've been killing innocent men, women, and children in the most brutal ways. beheadings, burnings. That element, again, that I'm going to tell you about is standing in the way of peace and progress. It's missing from that organization. Look at the situation in Ferguson, Sanford, Florida, Madison, Wisconsin. So many other places across America where unarmed young black men have been killed by police or others. We don't often hear about that. But there are other scenarios where violence is perpetrated amongst that particular demographic. And that element, too, is missing from that scenario. You hear almost every day about murders taking the lives of people for one reason or another. I can think of no reason that murder is justified, regardless of what your beef is. I can't think of no reason why it's justified. Again, that element, standing in the way of peace and progress, is missing from that situation. Rapists, you know what they do. You know, that element as well is missing. Standing in the way of peace and progress. The political situation. We have Republicans and Democrats and people of all political persuasions fighting with each other. They can not find common cause, you know, and they engage in nasty vitriolic rhetoric and tactics, attempting to impede each other. Now, these, mind you, are people that are elected by the people to do their business, and they won't do it. Some of them have decided it will not happen. Some of them have decided, my brothers and sisters, that it's not going to happen on their watch. Regardless of what party, regardless of what persuasion, that element, I'm going to tell you about it in a few minutes, is missing. It's standing in the way of peace and progress in that situation as well. There's a certain country in the world that's decided that it's going to take another country, take pieces of that other country. Okay? They've decided that they're going to rewrite the map, a map that they agreed to. That element, again, is standing in the way of peace and progress. We know about burglars who break into our homes and steal our valuables, things that you cannot replace if you worked 100 years for them. That element, standing in the way of peace and progress, is missing. Now, this element, which is standing in the way of peace and progress, is missing, doesn't just apply to terrorists. It doesn't just apply to geopolitical situations or politicians or murderers or thieves or rapists or anybody else other than us. It's not just everybody else but us. It includes us too. You walk into work sometimes. I hear you, Brother Emmanuel. You walk into work sometimes. People that know you walk right by you. They don't speak to you. People at work know you're there. They stab you in the back. They gossip. You hear me, Metropolitan? You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? Deliberate, insensitive acts designed to haze our fellow humans simply because they do something different from us, or they look different from us, or they think differently from us. Traffic. We see it all the time. I could go on all day talking about these elements, but I'm going to wrap it up. But you see it in traffic. People in traffic cut you off for a specific reason or no reason at all. I can remember having a conversation with a colleague some years ago who, by the way, is a vice president at the World Bank at the time, and she drives a small car. This was probably 10 years ago. She told me that she did not like people that drove SUVs. So when she saw people driving SUVs, what she would do is she would cut them off. So here's a person who was working on behalf of the people of the world to try to make a better place for the people of the world. But in the meantime, you better look out when you're on the Beltway, Pastor Lamar. If you see that Toyota coming, you better look out. So I said to her, well, do you get the fact that, you know, the world is full of pollution and that kind of pollution is just as bad as any other kind of pollution? You know, some people don't get that, or do they maybe get it but just don't care? That's a problem. That's a problem, Metropolitan. Gender bias. Ladies, y'all know what I'm talking about. Anybody in here? Everybody know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean when I say gender bias. These days, it has a slightly expanded importance, shall we say, because we seem to be just becoming aware that there are not just males and females about us, or people who identify as male and female, or people who have other understandings and other reasonings for who they are and what they want to be. Gender bias is another area where that element is missing. Throwing your trash out of your car on the street or polluting the environment, that's another missing element. That element, too, is missing from that. And I, too, am guilty. I was riding on a way to North Africa not too long ago. There was a gentleman sitting on the plane next to me, and I could tell he wanted to engage me, you know, because you're sitting on a plane and you know when somebody they're looking for an opportunity to talk to you. It's not just a plane. You can be walking down the street, or you can be anywhere, Brother Kirk. I hear you back there. You know what I'm saying? You can be anywhere. People want to engage you. I tried to ignore the brother. He's a Jewish fellow I later learned out from Stanford, who ran his own business, who was a multimillionaire from Silicon Valley, who is actually working in Germany now, working on sustainability. But I, because of my own self, was trying to ignore this fellow. So I, too, am guilty of that one element. So if you ask me what is that element, I'm going to tell you now because my time is winding up. One of the most well-known R&B artists of all time said it pretty well. Aretha Franklin. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me. Respect. Respect, y'all. The hip-hop artists, Common, Wu-Tang Clan, even Kanye West, who I arguably think perhaps engaged in one of the most well-publicized examples of disrespect during an award show some years ago. Even he has weighed in on how to respect your mother. You know, so the bottom line about it is there are all sorts of examples of how respect is missing from our society. Take a look at the terrorists, guilty of disrespecting the right to life of all throughout the world without fear. Murderers, guilty of disrespecting the miracle of life. Rapists, disrespecting the wishes and the bodies of others. Thieves, disrespect the property rights of others. Many politicians disrespect the thoughts and interest of others. The snob who walks by you when you get out of the elevator disrespects the basic existence. You know, they disrespect your basic existence to be in their life. And we can go on and on and on. But you know, Jesus talked about it. He talks about it in the Bible, Matthew 7:12. God created all people, created them differently for reasons and purposes we may not understand. Regardless of how, come on now, Brother Jonathan, I hear you. Regardless of how we perceive each other and others to be, we are all God's creations. And it is God's will for us to show respect to everyone. Romans 12:10. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor ye one another above yourselves. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment and a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on earth. So bottom line, people, what it is that I've been talking to you about that's missing from our society today is inherent in all of us because we're all human. It's the disrespect of humankind, the disrespect of the world, the place that we call home, the disrespect of the people that gave us life, the disrespect of people who sustain us, disrespect for our own selves, our own bodies, not recognizing that every time we diss somebody on the street and every time we ignore somebody sitting next to us, or every time we know when we go out to that restaurant with a friend of ours and it's time to pay the bill and we don't want to pay, we get quiet, that's disrespect too, okay? What I'm talking about to you is whether or not we want to really look at fixing this world we live in. National security is a broad topic area, it's a broad subject matter area, but I can look no further than myself on a daily basis and find multiple examples of simple disrespect and great disrespect in many different avenues throughout the world, and many people, you know what, folks don't even know it. Don't even know. Some of the most educated people in the world don't even know they're disrespecting other people. But where can they learn about it? Just like at the Brown Chapel. They can learn about it here at Metropolitan. That's a part of the reason why I'm here on Sunday mornings at 7:45. And for those of you who don't recognize me, that's because I'm usually a 7:45 guy. But you know what? You look good. I may actually have to come back to this. But part of the reason why I'm so avid about coming to this church is because I know I have flaws, big time flaws. And one of them is exactly what I tried to do to that brother on the plane. But you know, I realized you need to talk to this guy. And by the time I got done talking with him, he asked me, he said, you know, we'd like to have you come over and talk to us about the relationship between national security and sustainability, i.e. respect, you know? So what he was saying is the military situations that we have in so many places, the geopolitical situations that we have in so many places, the murders, the rapes, the thievery, just the basic ignoring of each other in so many situations is all a sustainability issue. Because I'm here to end on this for you, Metropolitan. If we don't get it right, if we don't fix it, if we don't start acknowledging people, if we don't start helping people, the homeless person at the bus stop who has nothing to eat, even though you're a little leery or skeptical about going up to these strangers, what are they going to do? How are they going to act? If we don't start addressing this on a mass scale, then we are ruining any chance we have to fix all of these great gifts that God's given us. And those great gifts are embodied in each and every one of these people around us. So as I end today, I'll just thank you and ask you a question. What are you going to do? Thank you.
Let us all stand. Would you put your hands together for Brother J.J. Green for his very thankful to have brothers like J.J. in the congregation. And as he wove out his oration, his narrative, I felt like I was listening again to this radio show that came out recently called Serial, where every week they added an additional bit of information. He kept me hanging on. I wanted to say, man, what's the element? What is it? He just did such a great job of keeping our attention and sharing with us in ways that are meaningful. As he was winding up, I always have to listen, but also figure out what I will say to you after hearing what we have heard today. And I went back to my own rearing, to what I learned from my parents and my grandparents. One of the foundational things that you learned if you grew up in a house like mine, it was very, very simple, but the elders were very serious about teaching you to speak to people. How many of y'all understand what I'm talking about? The houses that I grew up in multiple houses, not just my parents' house, but grandparents' houses and the houses of relatives and family friends. One of the things that will earn you a capital punishment, do you hear what I'm saying? Is for somebody to walk past and you not to speak. Anybody else grow up in a house like that? And I never understood it. I mean, we had to speak. We were taught that if someone walked past you and you did not speak, you did something very, very wrong. I can remember one day staying in my own grandmother's house and waking up and walking past her and not saying good morning. She said, wait a minute, boy. Do you know who you are? Better yet, do you know who I am? And I thought over the years about the cultural brilliance of our own ancestors in teaching us to speak. They were teaching us to do something for them that others would not do for them. And that is to recognize the shared humanity of every man, every woman, every boy, every girl. They would often be ignored because of who they were. And earlier today, Judge Aarons mentioned that great literary classic by Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man. They were trying to remind us that no human being is invisible, that every human being must be acknowledged. And what Brother JJ is reminding us of is that we must respect the humanity of everyone else. Would you turn to someone right now and say, I respect your humanity. I don't need to know who you are or where you are or what you do. By virtue of the fact that you exist, turn to somebody else and say, I respect your humanity. I respect your humanity. At the base of our faith is the knowledge that all of us, somebody say all of us, all of us are created in the imago Dei, the image and likeness of God. And so I open the doors of the church today as we sing this hymn of the church. Somebody needs to be reminded that though you have been disrespected, you are in a house of respect. And that God wants you to be a part of this community, not for any other reason other than you exist and God loves you. You don't have to do one more thing but be a human being and know that God loves you, God accepts you, God wants you to be a part of the beloved community. Here at Metropolitan, where we're striving to embrace this same community, let us sing together all to Jesus as we respect one another's humanity. Respecting your experiences, your challenges,